Dr Elpington.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I associate myself with both the condolences and also birthday good wishes to the NHS? Everyone in my constituency of Surrey Heath wants a new Frimley Park hospital, but the chosen site, the last remaining fragment of the ancient Frimley Common, is wholly inappropriate. It's inaccessible, behind multiple schools, and environmentally devastating. But worse, over recent weeks, I've received deeply troubling evidence that the preferred relocation site was known and being openly discussed by local political figures in 2023 before the official site selection process had even begun. The entirely reasonable conclusion, Mr Speaker, is that this project has been compromised from the outset and the site predetermined. I think the Prime Minister would agree that this is no way to begin a multi-billion-pound public procurement process. So would the Prime Minister please step in? Would the Prime Minister please step in, commission an urgent independent review?
I think the Prime Minister's got the question.
Well, Mr Speaker, his NHS Trust has identified their preferred site for the new Frimley Park Hospital, and detailed technical work can now start. And let's be frank about this hospital. The Tories promised 40 new hospitals with no funding and no delivery plan, and we've had to fix that. His hospital, thanks to Labour investment, is at the front of the queue. It will be one of the first in the country to be rebuilt. But his approach, Mr Speaker, has been, on the one hand, to demand a new hospital and then oppose actually building it. He's urged his constituents to oppose it because, quote, this is his quote, if the hospital goes ahead, there will be no golf course. So, Labour building new hospitals, he's standing up for golf courses. I can't think of anything more Lib Dem.
Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. A good, safe and secure home is the foundation of everything, and access to a council home at social rent continues to be the biggest issue that my Luton South and South Bedfordshire constituents get in touch with me about. But under this Labour government, in 24-25, councils delivered the highest annual number of social and affordable homes since 1991-92. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that we must build on this achievement and accelerate progress on council house building to ensure we deliver the biggest council housing programme since the post-war era?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm proud that this government is delivering the biggest boost to social and affordable housing in a generation. Backed by £39 billion, it means we're unleashing the biggest surge in council house building in over 30 years, and that includes 1,000 new sociable and affordable homes in Luton and Bedfordshire. And our social housing bill will reform right to buy to deliver even more social houses. A Labour government delivering the homes that we need.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Ben.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And can I associate myself and this side of the House with the Prime Minister's comments about Venezuela and also about the Lib Dems? Mr Speaker. But seriously, Mr Speaker, the Chief of Defence Staff made it known that the armed forces needed a minimum of £28 billion more to defend the country. Can the Prime Minister tell us why he thinks half that amount is enough?
Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'm very proud that this Labour government has delivered 2 major funding increases in just 2 years in government. The first, which was funded by overseas aid, took us to £270 billion over the spending review period. Mr Speaker, that is a record. The Defence Investment Plan gives us capability we need for the future. That sets a new record, Mr Speaker, of £300 billion over the next 4 years. That will be invested in drones and autonomous weapons, the largest ever investment, strengthening the UK's nuclear capability, upgrading our naval bases in the most significant way for 45 years, and confirming our commitment to the next generation of fighter jets. That is what is needed to keep our country safe.
Mr Speaker, he didn't say that it was enough, and that was a very long list of things that he's not yet paying for. It is not right and it is not fair, certainly not to our troops who put their lives on the line for all of us every single day. 3 weeks ago, Mr Speaker, 3 weeks ago, the Defence Secretary resigned, saying, I am being forced to make decisions that would increase the risk to personnel on operations and could make the country less safe. Since that letter, the Prime Minister has only increased spending by 0.01%. We can count, the generals can count, the Kremlin can count. His plan doesn't add up. How can the Prime Minister possibly stand there and say that this is enough?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is the most significant upgrade in defence spending since the 1980s. The Chief of Defence Staff has been clear that the plan accelerates the transformation we need for our armed forces. The First Sea Lord, it funds the capability we need to fight and win. The Chief Air Staff strengthens our contribution to NATO, and she must have missed that yesterday the Secretary-General of NATO welcomed the plan. All people who know what's in the plan and welcome it. Contrast that, Mr. Speaker, with their record in government, because they hollowed out the armed forces. Their record is cutting defence spending. My record is raising it to £300 billion and rising. Their record is cutting frigates by a quarter, cutting mine hunters by a half, and leaving 47 of 49 defence programmes delayed or over budget. My record is the biggest boost to defence investment since the 1980s. Their record is missing army recruitment targets every year for 14 years. We've given our armed force the biggest pay rise for 20 years and increased defence funding by £15 billion a year. That's a record I'm proud to stand on.
Mr. Speaker, the Chief of Defence Staff is an honourable man, and what he and the NATO Secretary-General have done is welcome the fact that a plan has been published. Just that it's been published. They've been waiting for over a year. Strategic Defence Review was last year. He is an honourable man, Mr. Speaker, who is having to make do with very little. The threat level has dramatically changed in the 2 years that the Prime Minister has been in office. Poland, since the Prime Minister took office, Poland has increased their funding to 4.8%. Germany has increased theirs to 3.7%. This year, Russia will spend 10% of GDP on defence. Meanwhile, Britain is spending it all on welfare. Even the limited plan that he has announced has completely unravelled because he hasn't found the money to pay for it. It is £5 billion short. We all know that he is leaving this mess to his successor. So can he confirm that the member for Makerfield has agreed to fund the shortfall?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what they did was to cut defence spending. When they came into power, defence spending was 2.5%. What did they do? They cut it to 2.3%, a cut. But on welfare, what did they do? They put it up by £88 billion. So we'll take no lectures from them about either welfare or defence. This is £15 billion of new investment for defence, delivered outside of a budget, outside of a spending review. Mr. Speaker, that's about £1 billion a year over 4 years. Because of the decisions at the last budget, we've got headroom of £22 billion. That is precisely so we can take decisions like this. We delivered it outside a budget, outside a spending review. Just like we did with the special educational needs, outside a budget, outside a spending review. Just like the previous government did, Mr. Speaker, when they announced their 5-year NHS plan in 2018, outside a budget, outside a spending review. And what did they say when they were challenged about it, Mr. Speaker? I'll quote. We will be able to explain exactly where every penny is coming from, but we will do that in the budget. That was the former Health Secretary, then the Chancellor. When they published their integrated defence review in 2020, what did they do? They set out the funding at the next spending review. So let's drop the faux outrage, focus on what matters, the biggest sustained increase for 40 years, the biggest increase for 45 years, providing what is needed to keep the country safe.
Mr. Speaker, he says that he's delivering this outside the budget. That's right, it should have been in the last budget. The Strategic Defence Review was published last year. It should have been in the last budget, not the next budget. The intelligence assessment that he himself has said we have says there could be an attack on NATO by 2030. But this plan doesn't deliver until after that. £5 billion is missing from his plan. it also relies on £11 billion of unidentified savings. The plan has unravelled. It is a total dereliction of duty, and I'm not the only one who thinks so. The Times newspaper said today the Prime Minister's legacy... well, why don't we wait and see what they said? That the Prime Minister's legacy is betrayal, failure and vulnerability, and that's one of the nicer headlines. So I will ask again, because he didn't answer the question, Mr. Speaker, did the member for Makerfield know that he was going to have to find £5 billion for the Prime Minister's plan?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when I became Prime Minister 2 years ago, this country spent £54 billion a year on defence. Because of the decisions we've taken, that will rise to £80 billion a year by 2029. That is a real terms increase of 27%, transforming our armed forces. And we're not going to take any lectures from the party opposite. They cut defence spending. They hollowed out the armed forces. That's what their Defence Secretary admitted that's what they did. They don't like it. They won't defend their record, Mr. Speaker, because they can't. They won't apologise for it, because they have to admit what we all know, it's a total failure. They just try to pretend the 14 years they were in power never really happened. We're in power, we've record investment in defence and security. I'm proud of this Labour government, and any Labour Prime Minister would stand behind this plan.
It doesn't sound like he's told the member for Makerfield to find £5 billion. He says any Labour Prime Minister would stand behind this plan. Let me tell him what Lord Richard Dannett, the former head of the Army, said yesterday. He said the Prime Minister had chosen the cheap option and called the plan woefully inadequate. Let me tell him what General Sir Richard Barrons, one of the authors of his own Strategic Defence Review, said yesterday. We are simply not going to be ready to defend this country properly. That's what they're saying. The reason that he is in this mess is because he was too weak to cut welfare when he had the chance. There are only three ways, Mr. Speaker, to find the missing £5 billion. Increase borrowing, increase taxes, or cut welfare. Which one will he recommend to the member for Makerfield?
Mr. Speaker, we're talking about £1 billion a year over 4 years. The decisions at the last budget gave us more than £22 billion in headroom, so we can take the decisions that they don't understand this because they trashed the old. We built a headroom of £22 billion. The very reason for the headroom is to have the credibility to take decisions outside the budget and outside the spending review. They don't understand it because they lost control of the public finances. In addition to more on defence and security, we've taken control of the public finances. That's why you have headroom to take credible decisions like this. £1 billion a year over 4 years, headroom of £22 billion because of the decisions we took at the last budget, which allow us to take these decisions.
Mr. Speaker, we understand it perfectly, and that's why, yes we do, that's why he is leaving and so is his Chancellor. They're laughing and pretending, but if he was doing such a fabulous job, why did he resign? Mr. Speaker, defence of the realm is the first duty of government. Yes, it is the first duty of government. I don't need to read again what General Sir Richard Barrons or Lord Richard Dannett said. Maybe they didn't hear it the first time. They can re-watch the clips. But defence of the realm, Mr. Speaker, is the first duty of government. Britain is facing a moment of danger unlike anything in our lifetimes, unlike anything that we saw even in government. We need a plan to fund our armed forces that meets this moment. They are the government for now, not for 10 years ago. And the fact is, Labour's plan is too weak, it is too little, and it is too late. If his successor doesn't want to be complicit in this failure, he should come out and condemn this plan. The money must be found, Mr. Speaker, and that money should come from cutting welfare, something these Labour MPs will not do. And if the Labour Party cannot defend our country, Mr. Speaker, what is the point of them?
It's just all talk. What did they actually do? They cut defence, 2.5% down to 2.3% in their 14 long years. And what did on welfare? They put the bill up by £88 billion. So no lectures from them. They failed in the first duty of government. And they won't defend their record, will they? They won't stand here and defend it. because they know that never do they stand here and defend their record, because they can't. 14 years of failure. They don't get up and apologise, which is what they should do, because they would admit what we all know how much they failed. So they just sit there pretending it didn't happen. Well, it did happen. You hollowed out the armed forces. We're correcting you. And I tell you what else, when we came into power, public services were on their knees. Today, we've seen the fastest fall in NHS waiting lists for 17 years. When I became Prime Minister, we inherited a broken economy. Today, we're outperforming the other G7 economies. When I became Prime Minister, our international alliances have been shredded. Now other countries are looking to us to lead on defence and security, foundations of a stronger and fairer country. Britain in a better state than we found it. That's the difference a Labour government makes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Two of my constituents, Cody and Liam Townend, and another mum from Leeds, Zoe Ward, all lost babies in different tragic circumstances. But they all went to the same funeral director who did not treat their babies' bodies with the dignity, care or respect that they deserved. I will not repeat the shocking details here. The BBC, for their part, published what they could last year. But more shockingly still, the police found nothing actionable in either case because there is no regulation of the funeral industry, and the individual in question is still operating in Leeds today. Given that the Department of Health and Social Care are due to make a decision about changing the law in this area, possibly before he leaves office, will the Prime Minister speak with ministers and officials in that department to ensure that when they consider the question of whether to regulate the funeral industry, their answer is yes?
Can I thank him for raising this case and thank him? He's been a committed campaigner on this. I have seen the details of the particular case. He's right not to repeat them in this chamber. They are horrifying. The lack of dignity and compassion is unacceptable, and I simply can't imagine the pain that Cody, Liam and Zoe experienced and are still experiencing. The status quo here is not working for families. And people deserve to know that their loved ones are treated with dignity and compassion. We are going to consider this closely, and I thank him for raising it. I do want stronger standards and oversight. I think that's absolutely needed, particularly in light of appalling cases like this.
Sir Ed Davey, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I not associate myself with the Prime Minister's comments about my party? But can I associate myself with all his remarks about the earthquake and humanitarian catastrophe in Venezuela? And can I commend the Scottish team and the Scottish fans on the joy they brought to the World Cup? They did the whole of Scotland proud. And can I wish England well against DR Congo later today? But with Rhys James and Gerald Quansah in doubt, I know the Prime Minister isn't the only one struggling for a solid defence plan. Mr. Speaker, the wars in Ukraine and Iran show us how seriously we must take the threat of missiles and drones hitting our country. Our national security requires the best possible missile defence system, including Royal Navy destroyers. But the funding in his plan for this falls dangerously short. Yet the Prime Minister has rejected our proposals for defence bonds, which were used in the past to rearm our country. So can the Prime Minister tell us why has he chosen to leave our country so vulnerable to missile attack?
Prime Minister.
Can I first join him on his comments about the Scotland team, the Scotland fans, and wish England well? I'm not sure about his gag. He was getting a bit better the other week, but he's gone back down. I'm afraid that one is a red card. But, Mr. Speaker, our defence investment plan gives our country what we need to fight now and into the future, the capability that's been assessed through the strategic review. Bonds, which we looked at very closely, are simply borrowing by another name, and we are already borrowing in a way which requires us to spend £1 in every 10 on servicing the interest on that. And I would gently point out, before he carries on with any criticism of our plan, that he sat in a cabinet that cut defence spending by 22%.
Sir Ed Davey.
The Prime Minister knows that our defence bonds are within his own fiscal rules, that he's had advice from his own team that he should adopt them, and I hope the Right Honourable Member for Makerfield will listen. But, Mr Speaker, I have another concern that I think the Prime Minister will share. The rising tide of racist violence and hate that we're seeing in our country, and the way it is being incited and normalised, including, I'm afraid, by some members of this House. I was talking to a British friend of Indian ancestry who told me how reform activists came to her door and said that if they get into power, she and her family will have their passports seized and their citizenship revoked. Does the Prime Minister agree that racism has no place in our country? And will he join me in condemning anyone who is stoking it?
Can I thank him for raising this? It is really important because our politics is becoming more diverse and racism and intolerance is permeating everywhere. And we have to deal with it. Because it's tearing our societies apart. It is keeping good people away from politics because they don't want to be involved in it. And it should be called out by every single person who's a politician at any level in this country. Mr Speaker, I say this looking at the plaque to Joe Cox, and of course we've got David Amos behind me too. We had a Joe Cox 10-year reminder that it was 10 years ago, just a week or so ago, that we lost Joe. And I had a reception in Downing Street with her parents and other close friends and relatives of hers. We read out the words of Joe again. The very sad thing is I was not able to say that in the 10 years since Joe's death, things have got better, because sadly they've got worse. That's on us to fix, all of us to fix, every single member of this House, whatever their party in. And anybody who flames it should be absolutely ashamed of themselves.
Mr Speaker, can I associate myself with the comments of the Prime Minister about the legacy of Joe Cox? I know all of us in this place have been following the contest for number 10 quite closely in recent weeks, but amid the North versus South debate, I think it's about time we had someone from the Midlands who was ready to step into this important position for our country. So I'm delighted to say we have two fantastic Black Country lads, Jude Bellingham from Stourbridge and Morgan Rogers from Hales Owen, who have both been doing us proud in the contested England number 10 role against our game for Congo this evening. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that we should congratulate England on their progress out of the group stage so far? And does he also agree with me that we need to do more to support
Prime Minister.
Well, I thought the next few weeks were about to get quite interesting, Mr Speaker, but can I... Look, we do all wish England the best of luck this evening, and every time those players step on the pitch, they represent the talent, ambition and diversity of this country. We're proud to be supporting the next generation, investing £400 million into grassroots facilities and over £1 billion in school sports. And if Thomas Tuchel needs any advice on penalties, he should ask David Seaman, who slotted one past him just a few weeks ago.
Dave Dougal.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I am gravely concerned. I am gravely concerned that time after time, this Prime Minister, in response to the abject and honest criticism of his defence investment plan, he cites recent trends in defence spending when he should be calibrating it against the chronic and very real threat that the people on these islands face. In his limited time left in number 10, will he get a grip of his paper-thin plan?
Prime Minister.
This is the party that thinks we should give up the nuclear deterrent. And he stands there to talk about defence. So we need no more advice and sanctimonious nonsense from the NSP. Before he or any of them give any more advice to me or this House, let's have some home truths. Their chief executive has just been jailed for 5 years for embezzlement. They're all pretending they didn't know anything about it. They couldn't even see the motorhome parked in the driveway, apparently. And now they're blocking inquiry into the Scottish Parliament. Before they offer any more advice, they should look in the mirror.
There's another question, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In this increasingly dangerous world, the space domain is critical. So I welcome the £3.2 billion set out for space in the Defence Investment Plan. The plan refers to Skynet 6A, the first military satellite to be designed, manufactured and tested completely in the UK, beginning at Airbus in my constituency of Stevenage and supporting 3,000 jobs across the country. So, does the Prime Minister agree that we must develop both the UK's sovereign capability in space and the British jobs that already power it?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank him? And our commitment to space in the Defence Investment Plan reflects how we're preparing our armed forces for the conflicts of the future. And when I see apprentices working in our defence industries, I see this investment creating the more opportunities, including those in many of our constituencies, including his. It underlines exactly what our investment delivers, Mr. Speaker. That's 60,000 new jobs, investing in British skills, promoting our brilliant industries abroad and driving growth in the UK.
Taylor.
Mr. Speaker, on Monday with colleagues I wrote to the Health Minister following the news that women's health and maternity services may be relocated away from St Helier Hospital due to building safety concerns. Yesterday we heard Baroness Amos's review state that poorly maintained buildings affect how safe people feel, how effectively staff can work, and whether care can be delivered in a way that is private, respectful and reliable. It has been reported today that DHSC's capital budget will be cut by more than £500 million over this Parliament to fund the DIP, which puts the new hospital programme timeline in doubt. So, will the Prime Minister arrange for the Health Secretary to visit St Helier Hospital with me to see its condition and hopefully agree to bring forward the build of the new Sutton Setch, build it today, not in 2034, to ensure safe and modern healthcare and maternity facilities for my constituents?
Prime Minister.
Well, in relation to his hospital, he knows that those decisions are taken at a local level based on expert advice. We are committed to prioritising women's health as we reform the NHS, including through our women's health strategy. In his area alone, we're investing £57 million to transform care. That's money that we provided at the budget. He actually voted against it, along with the rest of the Lib Dems at the budget. So they can't, on the one hand, complain about the lack of investment. Then we put the money forward, they vote against it. That, again, is very Lib Dem.
Michelle Welsh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Donna Ockenden review and the Baroness Amos review has exposed some very uncomfortable truths. That justice is not brought about by a system, a law, a protocol, a regulatory authority or NHS England, but by bereaved and harmed families, having to speak up over and over again about the most horrific and traumatic experience of their lives just to be heard. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that the system is not only failing, but it is cruel? And if we are to restore public trust, then we must finally introduce Hillsborough law in full, so that families can get the justice and accountability they need and deserve.
Can I thank her for raising this? Baroness Amos's findings show a deeply disturbing picture, deep fragmentation and an overly complex system. Women and families not being listened to, no proper accountability, and discrimination is driving inequalities in treatment and outcome. We will deliver the change that is needed. We will look at the urgent recommendations and deliver those of Baroness Amos, as well as those of Donna Ockenden. And can I thank her for leading from the front as the first maternity advisor, working with families and the NHS to deliver safer, better care for every mother and baby. And can I say that I know her son Billy would be very proud of her.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Mr. Speaker, through omission or insufficient advice, injured veterans may fail to place their compensation in a trust within the 1 year allowed by universal credit. Can discretion be had in compassionate cases?
Prime Minister.
I thank the right honourable gentleman. I'm enjoying our weekly exchanges. Every veteran who served in our country, and I thank him for raising this because it is a really important point, should be looked after and better able to access any compensation they're entitled to. We have dedicated pathways for veterans in every job centre to provide support with benefit claims and complex cases. But I can assure him and reassure him that anyone coming forward will get tailored support, and we'll seek to resolve any issues swiftly and fairly to see whether we can improve on that. If he's got any specific cases, or other members have, if he could pass, or others pass the details to us, we will look at them. I noticed that BBC reported his question last week, him saying it would almost certainly be his last to me as Prime Minister. A reminder, you shouldn't always believe everything you read in the news. I look forward to seeing him at the same place, same time next week.
Catherine West.
Mr. Speaker, could I thank the Prime Minister for his calm and authoritative leadership in international affairs, and could I also thank the UK missions abroad who have enormous respect for him, and could I also ask him to put on record his thanks to the security, diplomatic and international aid workforce who work day and night on behalf of the UK abroad. And closer to home, Mr. Speaker, could I also, as a fellow North Londoner, say, despite the heat waves, North London forever, regardless of the weather.
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank. She's someone who always speaks her mind, and I join her in thanking our people. I'm proud that during my tenure we've delivered 5 major trade deals. We've led the coalition of the willing to support Ukraine and strengthened the NATO alliance, built stronger partnerships with the EU and kept us out of the war in Iran. And can I thank her for her contribution that she made as Foreign Office Minister.
Joshua Reynolds.
Speaker. Yesterday, the Prime Minister visited Maidenhead to announce his new defence investment plan. However, as we now know, he's leading it to his successor to decide how to fund the majority of it. We cannot fund our armed forces without growth, and we cannot get growth in Britain without the red tape that British businesses are having be dismantled, as well as trading closer with our closest neighbours. So will the Prime Minister agree that a new growth and defence partnership with Europe is how we can properly fund our forces, and will he urge his successor to drop Labour's red lines to get it done?
Prime Minister.
Well, he obviously didn't pay so much attention as he should to what I was saying yesterday in terms of the plan, the capability, the record investment that we're putting in and how we're funding it. I do agree we need to work more closely with the EU on defence and security as well as trade and the economy. That's precisely what we agreed at the EU-UK summit last year, and we've been building on that. And I'm proud to say in the last 2 years, the relationship between the UK and the EU has been transformed into a much better, trusted relationship. It is very important as Prime Minister that I leave the country in better state than I found it, and I do.
Sarah Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dr. Carly Mellor, an NHS dentist in my constituency, spoke to me recently, and I quote, "Ministers pledged to fix the failed contract we worked to within this Parliament. The government has begun discussions on a new contract and promised a public consultation on it this summer. A typical dentist delivering NHS care does so at a loss. With every passing month, more practices are reconsidering their future in the NHS, while millions of patients continue to struggle to access care. Reforming the contract is the route to better treatment for my constituents. Please can we start the consultation without delay?"
Prime Minister.
Can I thank her for raising this? I'm pleased that we've delivered over 1.8 million additional courses of NHS treatment, because no one needing urgent care should be left in pain and waiting for help. Mr. Speaker, we've already made early reforms, including embedding urgent care into the contract so people get fast access to NHS care, and delivering the first sustained expansion of dental school places in nearly 20 years to get extra dentists trained. We will consult on a reformed dental contract soon, and I'll make sure that ministers update my honourable friend.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Ashfield, 4 workers, including 2 nurses, were kicked out of their HMO, and Serco put 4 illegal migrants in this HMO. One of these illegal migrants was a Pakistani national. He went on to rape a young girl, a vulnerable young girl, on a park in Ashfield. He's now doing 14 years in prison. This was a monster allowed into this country by this awful government. But if a Prime Minister is really serious about protecting young women and girls, does he agree with me and Reform UK that every single illegal migrant coming to this country should be detained, not allowed to claim asylum and then deported?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud of the fact that after net migration reached almost 1 million under the party opposite, we brought it down by 82%. On the asylum system, which he references, now asylum decisions are made at record levels, the backlog is down, removals are up 41%, and we're closing asylum hotels. They lost control of our borders. Now small boat crossings are coming down, and we deported 70,000 people with no right to be here. He likes to ask questions. He should be asking some questions of the leader of his party sitting next to him. He received £5 million in crypto from a crypto billionaire and then privately lobbied the Bank of England on digital currencies. So did their leader carry out lobbying paid? Why did he keep his £5 million gift secret? And I'm happy with their leader earning £20,000 an hour flogging gold bullion. They need to ask the questions across their benches, but they never do.
Lewis Atkinson.
Mr. Speaker, too many people are waiting too long for NHS mental health care, with over 6,000 adults waiting up to 2 years. In Sunderland, grassroots organisations like the wonderful Betsy Jenny Cafe are providing support to our community, but they cannot substitute for timely NHS-funded care. So as the government consults on its new mental health strategy, will the Prime Minister agree with me that it must include clear waiting time standards?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him, and we're determined to transform mental health so everyone gets the support they need. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to say that we've recruited 8,700 extra mental health workers. We've opened the first of 6 24/7 neighbourhood mental health centres, and we're ensured that nearly 800,000 more children and young people have access to a mental health support team in their school or college. There is more to be done, but this is a real step forward.
Colin Lockhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week in Northern Ireland, a former member of this House was convicted for the most horrific child sexual abuse against 2 girls. I want to commend the victims for their extraordinary bravery in coming forward. It was their courage secured a conviction, and I have no doubt that their resolve will help others find their voice. No matter an abuser's power or status, there can be no hiding place for someone who would take the safety or would steal the innocence of young children. Mr. Speaker, thousands of vulnerable young women in Rotherham, Oldham and across the UK were subjected to organised child sexual abuse and exploitation. In many cases, it was Pakistani heritage grooming gangs responsible, while institutions looked the other way. Before leaving office, the Prime Minister has the ability and opportunity to leave a legacy. Will he ensure that the promised statutory rape gang inquiry is delivered so the truth can finally be told, and that those responsible are held to account, and that no child's safety is ever sacrificed ever again for racial sensitivities?
Minister.
Can I thank her for raising the case in Belfast that concluded last week, and, like her, salute the courage of the victims to come forward. It must have taken extraordinary courage. It does in every single one of these cases, but particularly when you've got powerful people and institutions, it takes even more courage to do so. And so we salute them for their own acts, but also because it will, I hope, have helped others to see that if you do come forward, you will be believed and justice can be done, notwithstanding the difficulties. On grooming, we have set up the inquiry, and it's very important it goes wherever the evidence should take it, and that's an absolute guiding principle of the inquiry.
Final question, Alex Davis-Jones.
Mr. Speaker, this afternoon we are joined in the gallery by Lisa Phillips, a British survivor of Jeffrey Epstein's horrific and despicable trafficking and abuse. Lisa's bravery is to be commended, and her determination for justice and accountability on behalf of all UK survivors should be put on record. And I want to place on record my thanks to you, Mr. Speaker, for meeting with Lisa this week. Your solidarity means more than you will ever know. So in that vein, will the Prime Minister please commit to meet with Lisa and the other British survivors and commit to what is needed? a full public inquiry so we can have the truth, justice and accountability.
Prime Minister.
Can I thank you for raising this really important issue and drawing it to the House's attention? And I'm glad that we're joined in the gallery today. It is really important that we keep our focus on violence against women and girls, and I'll make sure the meetings she requested are set up.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. Let the front bench change over. We now come to the urgent question. Matt Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs if she will make a statement on Israel's planned illegal expansion in the E1 zone in the occupied Palestinian territories.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the British government firmly opposes the E1 settlement plan. It would divide the West Bank in two and mark a serious breach of international law. The Prime Minister led 11 other world leaders in a joint statement last month. That condemned the E1 plans, urged the Israeli government to end settlement expansion, and warned businesses of legal and reputational consequences of participating in construction in E1 and other settlements. We are clear. Businesses should not bid for construction tenders in E1 or other settlements. We are deeply alarmed by the situation in the West Bank. Illegal settlements continue to expand, settler violence remains at record levels, and the Israeli government has further entrenched its control. Last month, the Foreign Secretary announced further sanctions in response to that violence in the West Bank. That is the fourth package under this government. We welcome the condemnation of settler violence at the highest levels of Israeli society. Now, Israel must conduct swift and transparent investigations into these attacks and ensure accountability. The Foreign Secretary also announced that we'd updated our business guidance to clearly advise British businesses and citizens not to engage in economic and financial activity in settlements. We have been concerned by efforts to advertise settlement property in the UK and by reports of charitable links between the UK and settlements. I have written to the Advertising Standards Authority and spoken to the Charity Commission on these issues. But I want to reassure the House, Mr. Speaker, that whilst these trends in the West Bank continue to worsen, we will continue to take steps to ensure no one can profit from the sale of land that has been taken unlawfully, that violent settlers are held to account, that the British government stands up for the rule of law, the right of Palestinians to self-determination, and for the prospects for peace and security through a two-state solution. We are in discussion with partners, Mr. Speaker, including discussions with those few countries who have explored how bans to settlement trade might work. We are looking at further concrete steps to counter settlement expansion and to promote peace and security. It is only through a negotiated two-state solution, not unilateral action, that a viable path to long-term peace can be achieved. That must be a path that guarantees security to both Israelis and Palestinians alike.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just yesterday, the Israeli Land Authority published new dates for the tenders for the construction of the proposed E1 settlement zone in the West Bank. The bidding period for the tender ends in October. And once the contracts have been awarded, it will become impossible to stop E1. So, Mr. Speaker, why is E1 so critical? Because the proposed settlement would absolutely and permanently destroy any prospect of a true two-state solution. It is a large area of land which would split the West Bank from north to south, severing connections between Palestinian communities and East Jerusalem, while forcibly transferring 7,000 Palestinians, itself a war crime under the Rome Statute. A few of us visited just 4 weeks ago We saw firsthand the accelerated pace at which Israel is expanding its illegal settlements. A massive 2,000 housing units have been approved just since that visit, according to the United Kingdom Chargé d'Affaires to the UN on Monday. It is clear Israel is systematically and deliberately doing all it can to make a two-state solution impossible, and its impunity must end. Mr. Speaker, will the Minister today make categorically clear that any businesses, organisations, including financial and insurance institutions or individuals that participate in or facilitate the construction of the E1 zone will be sanctioned and not allowed to trade and do business here with the UK, and legislate accordingly as a matter of urgency? Secondly, I, alongside 139 parliamentary colleagues, have urged the Minister to end all trading with illegal Israeli settlements. Can I once again urge the Minister to implement a full ban and suspend the FTA with Israel based on continued violations of human rights and the prospect of this development? Mr. Speaker, Palestine is fracturing before our eyes. Our intelligence can see this. The international community must stop E1.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his attention to these issues, and I know he has travelled recently to the occupied Palestinian territory to see it with his own eyes. As you've heard me say many times, Mr. Speaker, I won't comment on sanctions from this dispatch box, but I have been clear, myself and indeed the Prime Minister has led 11 other world leaders to be absolutely crystal clear on the implications and consequences if the E1 settlement continues. He was clear, as were his colleagues in that statement, that there would be implications for the businesses themselves. So far, Mr. Speaker, we have heard word from the Israeli government about their plans. Clearly, businesses in the region will want to consider carefully the warning from the statement last week, and indeed the clear commitment from the dispatch box here in the UK that we will take further measures if the continued action to increase violent settlements continues in the West Bank.
Wendy Morton, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will directly address the matter of settlements in just a moment, but I want to make a broader point first. That is that diplomacy is about rolling up your sleeves. It's putting in the hard yards, not just issuing condemnatory statements. So I do believe if the Minister wants to have a real sway with the government of Israel, then there has to be a meaningful dialogue. But at the moment, there is no dialogue between this Labour government and Israel, despite the obvious importance of the bilateral relationship to Britain across so many domains. That is because of the decisions Labour has made, from suspending export licences when Israel was burying murdered hostages, to cancelling trade talks, to recognising a Palestinian state while hostages were still being held in terrorist captivity. And by deliberately keeping relations with Israel in a deep freeze, Labour is cutting off its ability to influence situations on the ground. Nonetheless, let me say that settlement expansion in the West Bank is not helpful for achieving the long-term peace we all want to see. And that has long been my party's position. We would also like to see Israel use its legal system to really bear down on settler violence. We on these benches do support a two-state solution, one that guarantees security and stability for both the Israeli and the Palestinian people. So today, I'd like to ask the Minister if he can tell us whether he has spoken to his Israeli counterparts directly on the E1 situation. Is the government doing anything at all to help the Abraham Accords expand or to unblock issues holding up a broader regional peace? And finally, can he update us on his assessment of the Palestinian Authority's plan to hold elections in November, and whether he is concerned by the PA's lack of progress on the total overhaul of curriculums and welfare policy that is so clearly needed? Thank you.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if I can deal with the latter points raised by the spokesman for the opposition first. Yes, we continue to talk to the Palestinian Authority, including on the reform agenda and the need for elections. It is an undeniable fact, Mr. Speaker, that I am the Middle East Minister who recognised a Palestinian state during my time, sanctioned Israeli ministers who now regularly take to the airwaves to issue in the most bloodthirsty terms encouragement for some of the activity which I am being asked about at the moment. It is, I'm afraid, an inevitable consequence of the actions that have been announced from this dispatch box that the warmth of my relationship with my counterparts in Israel has indeed suffered. But this government will not hesitate to stand up for the principles which I think are supported right across this House. She could not have failed to hear the groans from behind her on her own benches. I know in recognising a Palestinian state, I was of course supported by those behind me, but I also think by those behind her as well.
Dear Member Thornbury, Chair of the Select Committee.
Mr. Speaker, I read an interesting letter recently from the Dutch Foreign Minister to the Speaker of their Parliament, and in it he said that his government had carefully weighed the efficiency, the effectiveness, the proportionality, the enforceability and the administrative burden of introducing a full trade ban on Israeli goods coming from the illegal settlements in the West Bank. He said, having looked at all of that, the Netherlands had decided that the right thing to do, the legal thing to do, was to push for a full trade ban with the settlements. And so has Ireland, and Norway, and Spain, and Slovenia, and Belgium, and Luxembourg, and Portugal, and Finland, and Poland. My question is, when are we going to join them?
Mr. Speaker, I'd just like disagreeing with the Right Honourable Lady. Slovenia have introduced and then repealed the measures that they've taken. I think in our discussions with our counterparts, there are a number of technical difficulties that people are encountering, particularly those in the European Union. But I would just be clear to the House, as I have in my statement, I am confirming today that we are in discussions about such measures.
Harding, the Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, here we are again. The Liberal Democrats have welcomed the government's historic decision to recognise the State of Palestine, which we on these benches have long called for. We have welcomed more recent statements of intent, including just 10 days ago in this House. But these statements are utterly hollow without action, especially when we know that the Israeli Security Cabinet's stated aim is to make a future Palestinian state unviable. We have asked these questions before, but we will ask them again. When will the government put forward a clear plan to halt and reverse this illegal expansion into East Jerusalem and the West Bank? When will they respond to the 2024 ruling of the ICJ? When will the government introduce a package of sanctions, including fines, for any UK firms which bid for contracts for settlement construction in E1 or anywhere in the occupied Palestinian territories? Will the government expand this to cover any UK financial institution that finances or facilitates UK companies' involvement in construction or other services? And when will the UK move fast to ban all UK trade in goods and services with illegal Israeli settlements?
Mr. Speaker, I think I've addressed most of those questions already. I've just confirmed, again, as I did in the statement, that we are in discussions about the further measures in relation to West Bank goods. We set out business guidance. It was the fourth round of sanctions that the Foreign Secretary announced in June. We have moved, if she makes reference to speed, we have moved, I think she will acknowledge, rather more quickly than some of our colleagues. I'm pleased to see many of our partners and allies taking some of the measures that I announced in this House in 2025, including sanctions on the ministers that I mentioned. We are moving with alacrity in response to what we see. The question at issue in the urgent question is about the E1 settlement expansion. It is rumoured that there is now a timetable for those tenders. I have been clear, as I can be, from this dispatch box, that we are watching very carefully who bids for those tenders. We have been clear repeatedly to the Israeli government about our view on the E1 expansion. I have repeated it today. The question that is before us is whether or not, in the run-up to the Israeli election, commercial entities choose to bid for those tenders, and that is what we will be watching carefully and taking action in response to.
Sarah Champion, Chair of the International Law.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's right that the government acknowledges that Israel's presence in Palestine is illegal under international laws, but for 2 years it hasn't responded to the ICJ's advisory ruling that Israel's actions towards Palestinians in the West Bank may constitute forcible transfer. The Israeli government expressly backs the E1 scheme, which will necessarily displace tens of thousands of Palestinians and dissect the West Bank. Netanyahu says of the plan, "We are going to fulfil our promise that there will be no Palestinian state. This place belongs to us." Mr Speaker, the UK's current situation is unsustainable. So will the Minister acknowledge the Israeli government's role in the forcible transfer of Palestinians in the West Bank and act accordingly with full range of diplomatic interventions?
Mr Speaker, I wouldn't want there to be any ambiguity about the force of our views about what is going on in the West Bank. That is why we have done 4 rounds of sanctions. That is why I am setting out clearly today what the likely consequences are should that action continue. The advisory opinion of the ICJ is important, but it is a non-binding opinion of an international court. It does not require, we do not require to take a judgment on that opinion in order to take action. And indeed, we have taken very considerable action over the last 2 years in the way that I have set out.
Mark Mitchell.
Madam Speaker, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I believe personally that the life of a Palestinian child is as precious as an Israeli child, and that is my foundation to all of this. May I congratulate the Minister for the Middle East and indeed the Prime Minister in his absence for having the courage and the leadership to recognise the Palestinian state what they did. I supported that and I continue to support that, and I think indeed, Madam Speaker, this urgent question today justifies that position of last September, because at that point we were all concerned that the viability of a Palestinian state was reducing as the weeks go by, and we've seen that the policy, the extant policy of the current Israeli government is continue those illegal occupations and expansion. So could the Minister tell the House what is the latest on his sort of discussions in Washington about the Board of Peace and reconstructing Gaza and ensuring that there is a viable Palestinian state? And then secondly and finally, his view on whether the current Israeli government position is likely to go beyond this autumn.
I thank the honourable gentleman for the question. We clearly speak now, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the run-up to an Israeli election campaign. They are likely to have their elections in October. There is a particularly, as indeed in any democratic country, a particularly heavy amount of policy positioning by various parties. We are calling on all Israeli politicians to abide by the basic principles, both of international law, but also the very, very important 20-point plan to which he alludes. I have spoken to officials, both of the Board of Peace, of NCAG, as well as the Palestinian Authority. It is vital that we make progress on that plan. There are still insufficient quantities of aid getting into Gaza. There are still unresolved questions about the disarmament of Hamas, and we are playing our full role behind the scenes to try and make progress on those questions. But this situation is becoming very urgent indeed, both in the West Bank and indeed in Gaza.
Shnar Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The E1 settlement expansion programme is clearly designed to undermine a Palestinian state, despite this government, for the first time in our history, recognising Palestinian statehood. So can my honourable friend highlight the time frame within which he's working in relation to the points he made in the discussions to do with the FTA, as well as other actions, including sanctions? I recognise he can't talk about the specifics, but can he set out the timeline to assure us that that works in concert with the expansion plan, so that we are not acting after the event, which is often has been the case in relation to past actions by the Israeli government?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm hesitant to end up setting out what the Israeli government's plans may or may not be from the dispatch box. They will do so themselves through their own channels. As I understand it, there is an intent to have a tender which would end in October, as one of the colleagues opposite, one of the members opposite alluded to. We will work on that timetable as well. That is clearly running right up to the Israeli election. It is deeply inappropriate to proceed with a programme so close to an Israeli election with such grave consequences internationally.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank the member for Warwick and Leamington for raising this urgent question. I was on the trip to Israel the other week with him, and I think we saw all too clearly and depressingly the very clear strategy of the Israeli government when it comes to E1 as a way of just effectively blowing out of the water any delivery of a two-state solution. Could I gently urge the Minister that the quiet, gentle FCDO watching brief, we're looking at events, we're seeing as things unfold, now needs a bit of gumption and muscle behind it. And the recent statement by President Trump, where he reminded Israel that without America, Israel would not exist, should send a chill up the spine of Benjamin Netanyahu and his ministers. So as well as trying to talk to his Israeli counterparts, what conversations is he having with the Americans, who in such great part provide the massive amount of military support to Israel, to try and get the Netanyahu government, when it comes to E1, to rein it in?
Madam Deputy Speaker, both me and the Foreign Secretary and indeed other ministers of the government do discuss these questions with the American administration. It is obvious, as I think the President of the United States has himself said, that the Israeli government is alienating even some of its closest allies in its conduct, both in the West Bank and indeed in Gaza.
Janet Davey. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank my honourable friend for his response in regard to Israel breaking international law and indeed opposing and denouncing illegal settlements in the West Bank. Recently, at the International Development Committee, we heard about some of the atrocities that are taking place, and one in particular was about a gunshot that was fired through a car, killing a 7-month-old baby and their parents. This community has no protections and has no legal protections. They are not safe. Can the Minister say what more this government is thinking of doing or considering or doing to just bring about legal protections for this desperate community?
Madam Deputy Speaker, as I said in my response, questions of justice and accountability are foremost in our mind. We raise them with the Israeli government regularly, particularly in relation to cases which also involve British nationals. We are still awaiting justice and accountability for the World Central Kitchen incident, which killed a number of British aid workers. But I know so many stories like the one my honourable friend refers to. I remember visiting Ramallah before I was a minister, and there had been a killing of children on the streets driving in to see the Palestinian Authority. There are far too many such cases, and we continue to make that point with force, both to the Israelis and in multilateral settings as well.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in June last year, the UK sanctioned Israeli far-right Minister Bezalel Smotrich for inciting violence against Palestinian communities. In recent weeks, Smotrich has issued an order to displace the Palestinian Bedouin community. The UK position on sanctions against Smotrich was part of a joint statement last year with Australia, New Zealand, Norway and Canada. What talks has the government had with those same partners about further united sanctions against other Israeli ministers?
For obvious reasons, Madam Deputy Speaker, I won't disclose full details of diplomatic talks, but I'm sure the honourable gentleman will see the number of things that we have done jointly, including the E1 statement that I referred to last month. We think we have more impact and more influence when we work in concert with our friends, and that's what we will always seek to do.
Nish.
Deputy Speaker, I was proud last year to be part of the government that finally recognised the state of Palestine, but the very idea of statehood is illusory when these types of activities are happening. So can I ask the Minister, after 4 rounds of sanctions, what is being done with international partners, as my honourable friend earlier mentioned, to hold individuals to account for forced displacement, because we do know that constitutes a war crime under international humanitarian law?
It gives me no particular pleasure, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be talking about the 4th round of sanctions. One would wish that diplomatic activity would have been enough to prevent the kind of incidents which so many members of the House are talking about this afternoon. But while they continue, so will we.
Kit Malthouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. They say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And many of us feel that way at these statements. But surely the Minister must be starting to feel that way too. He must recognise that the E1 settlement would represent the final complete collapse of any British strategy in Israel and Palestine, and would have wider ripples on our standing in the world. And therefore, surely it's incumbent upon him to change his modus operandi. We've thus far had, throughout the last, 2 years of savagery, from both governments, frankly, talk, meagre measures, talk, none of which has had any impact on the conduct of the Israeli government. Surely now is the time to lay out exactly what the consequences would be for the establishment of the E1 settlement in plain terms, so that there is a hard red line that the Israelis can make a judgment about whether they want to cross or not.
Minister.
I gently disagree. I do feel some force in what the honourable gentleman says about insanity doing the same thing again and again, and we've had many such exchanges of this nature. Over the course of that 2 years, the British government has taken a whole range of steps. We've talked about recognition, we've talked about sanctions, and that is returning to the question about what are the consequences for the Israeli government. We could not have been clearer alongside 11 other world leaders about what the consequences would look like. And I would just say gently to the honourable gentleman, the range of actions taken by the government I'm a part of were absolutely unthinkable to him when he was sitting on these benches on the other side. Recognition, suspension of armed... We have done it, you did not.
No, you are. I know this is a very sensitive debate. Let's make sure that we keep our emotions in check. Kim Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Israel's illegal expansion in the E1 zone of the OPT is a clear breach of international law and making a viable Palestinian state impossible. So does the Minister agree with me that this is nothing short of ethnic cleansing and this government should do everything in its power to prevent it from happening, sanctioning all British companies complicit in the expansion, bringing the end to settlement goods and a full arms embargo?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've set out as clearly as I can our position on the E1 settlement, and I've also been clear no one should be profiting from unlawfully seized land.
Speaker, this expansion is yet another egregious violation of international law, and as expected, the UK government has unequivocally condemned it. But the problem is that Tel Aviv understands that condemnation from the United Kingdom is pretty meaningless and is largely consequence-free. And that's a position that simply cannot hold. So will he lay out now what the consequences will be for the State of Israel, but also what the consequences will be for any UK company who seeks to involve themselves in this illegal expansion into the E1 zone?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I just want to gently push back on the suggestion that what we do has no consequence. I've been pleased to see, as I said to the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, that other of our partners and allies have taken the actions that we have. There is consequence to Israel's position in the world when they alienate as many of their friends and allies as they have done. We have set out as clearly as we can, both for companies and for the Israeli government, what our views on the E1 settlement are. We did so at head of government level, in last month, and that is a statement which has been, I think, seen widely around the world. I cannot guarantee this House that people will take heed of that statement, but we have set out our position in exactly the way he requests.
Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've joined with other MPs in visiting the West Bank and East Jerusalem. The mega development, this zonal occupation, is huge scale. It's massive cities, it's dual carriageway, it's universities, it's hospitals, and it's absolutely undermining the peace of these two nations. And so I will ask the Minister, what more can be done at an international level? What's being done by our mission in the UN to bring in international sanctions working together? And can you tell us more about what's being done with America? Because it's being done with their blessing, support and money. And so what more can be done to have a change of pace and a different envoy going in from America to sort the peace out in the Middle East?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I won't speak for the American government. I think they have set out their position on their concerns about annexation quite clearly. We have discussed throughout the course of this afternoon just how significant a development the E1 development will be, and I think that is understood in Washington, DC as well.
Andrew Morrison.
I do share the Minister's frustration at appearing to be on the sidelines as this Israeli government divides up the West Bank, making a two-state solution nigh on impossible, contrary to the Fourth Geneva Convention, Oslo II, and all the rest of it. However, does he agree with me that his capacity to influence this is finite if Israel, under Netanyahu, is not listening to the Trump administration, they almost certainly won't be listening to the one that he's a part of. But equally, he can do something in this awful situation, which is at least to protect those who will suffer the consequences of what is happening in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, and that is to protect those who are at the butt of a lot of the violence in this country, which is the Jewish community. What will he do to make sure they don't suffer the consequences of what's going on?
I thank the honourable gentleman and my predecessor for his question and the opportunity to comment on anti-Semitism. Before I do, I just want to say this is a very delicate period in Israeli politics. I hope that the result of the Israeli election is a set of Israeli policies much more close to the wishes of this House. He is, of course, right that my ability to influence developments on the ground is finite. If it was not finite, we would not be in this situation at the moment. But we will continue to use all of our leverage to try and ensure that there is a change. And during this period, we can perhaps hope that the Israeli political process will deliver results more akin to policy that this House would like to see.
John McDonnell.
The frustration that we all have, and I want to live long enough to see Netanyahu before a criminal court. And I know the frustration. When we raise individual cases, there's frustration about will it have any effect. But the effect it does have sometimes is that people know, therefore, they're not forgotten. So on the annexation of the West Bank, part of that has been about the arrests of individuals. And one of them is Dr. Mazen al-Rantizi, known as the Doctor of the Poor. Could I ask the Minister to raise his case with the Israelis? But also could I ask him to raise another case that we raised some time ago with Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, who's been 500 days now in isolation. If we could at least raise those cases, at least their families know they're not forgotten.
We have and we will, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. All this hand-wringing over the E1 zone is very important, but in reality it is part of the Greater Israel Plan. They already control 70% of the Gaza Strip, squeezing the whole population into the sea or into Egypt. They are already supporting, by military means, all the activities of the settlers and their abominable behaviour towards Palestinian people, and this construction of massive settlements all over the West Bank. In reality, it is Israel's strategy, Israel's plan, and Israel's determination that we're up against. Merely condemning them for this occupation of E1 will achieve nothing. There has to be a policy of stopping all arms trade and military cooperation of any sort with Israel until they end this settlement policy. And anything less than that simply will be just hand-wringing that the Israeli government will just ignore.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd just like to say that I do not think that the policy of settlements is supported across the whole of Israel. That is very clear in the discussions about the elections that are coming. There are many voices in Israel who recognise the terrible harm being done to the state of Israel by the expansion of settlements. And I hope the Madam Deputy Speaker will forgive me, just to come back to the point about anti-Semitism, we must be really careful in our language. There are many, many Israelis, and indeed many, many British Jews, who can see the terrible damage done by violent settlements, and we must not tar communities in this country or the whole nation of Israel with the same brush. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to return to the point that the Honourable Member made.
Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So first, may I thank the Minister most sincerely for his statement, for his is not an easy task. Now, Eileen and Catherine from Bury St Edmunds lobbied me here yesterday in Parliament, for they feel very deeply about the plight of the Palestinians, as do we all. They asked me, what can we do in this House to influence the government of Israel? And I believe that we must support progressive voices in Israel, for this is an election year. Does the Minister agree with me?
Yes.
I do agree, and I want to pay tribute to my honourable friend's work. I know he has been an active voice on these questions, sought to visit Israel to engage with those progressive voices, and more fool them that they did not allow him in.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister has one of the toughest jobs in government. He carries out his duties with diligence, with courtesy, with reasonableness and with ability. So can I wish him well in whatever may come in the future, and I hope he retains his post. Members on both sides of this House have rightly highlighted the illegality of settlements and rightly expressed support for a two-state solution. However, it was reported that on approving the E1 zone development last year, Israel's finance minister said, and I quote, "It buries the idea of a Palestinian state." Will he unequivocally reiterate his full condemnation for such a statement and approach?
I will, and I thank the honourable gentleman for his courteous words.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And before I start, may I thank the Minister not only for his response to this statement, but his robust response to the opposition front bench's response, which I have to say was pretty appalling. The E1 settlement plan deliberately cuts the West Bank in two. The escalating violence and expansion of illegal settlements not only undermine the viability of the Palestinian state, but flies in the face of international law. This is not by accident, this is by deliberate design. Will the Minister outline how exactly the government can guarantee that illegal settler activity is not supported by UK-registered businesses, charities or trade? And how will we hold them to account if they ignore the guidance set out?
I thank my honourable friend for the question. She's been a doughty advocate on these questions for many, many years, and I was pleased to join her to meet students from Gaza just earlier this week. We will take steps to ensure the UK is not in any way involved. Where there is legitimate trade with Green Line Israel, that is of course permissible, but where businesses in this country trade with the occupied territories and seek to make a profit from land which has been unlawfully procured, then we will take action.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Build E1, kill the prospect of Palestine. It's actually that simple. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's the stated aim of why they are doing this. We've got a small window to affect what happens next because, and the Minister said it himself, the Israeli elections are soon. If we are going to make any difference to the ordinary Israeli politic about who they decide to elect, then we need to act now and turn this on its head. He talks about technicalities in banning trade with the illegal settlements. I've laid a bill that makes it quite simple. Prohibit it now, put the onus on the Israeli government to sort it out, and if they do change their policy, then we will change ours.
I thank the honourable lady for the question, and I can reassure her that I'm very conscious of the electoral timeline and the rumoured timeline for the tenders as well, and that's one of the reasons why we've set out the statements that we have on this timeline that we have.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As co-chairs of the APPG for Britain and Palestine, my honourable friend, the member for Middlesbrough and Thornsby East, have written to over 43 organisations who are suspected to have or have previously been involved in unlawful expansion in the occupied territories. And this was to warn them of the potential issues if they should try to bid for these tenders. We have also been in contact with counterparts in Europe who are going to be doing a similar thing, and in Australia, and hope that members in the New Zealand and Canadian parliaments will also follow that. But getting to what the government can do, the Minister has mentioned in terms of monitoring. Has the government written to governments, not just a state, but written to these entities to make them aware of their responsibilities? And what will they do if they're found to actually bid for these tenders?
I thank my honourable friend for the question. I've set out the statement we made last year, the intensity of focus that we have on these issues, and I wrote to the Advertising Standards Agency following concerns raised in many places, including in this House, about an event some weeks ago, and have indeed engaged with the Charity Commission following concerns being raised as well.
Dr. Ellie-Childs.
Thank you. Madam Deputy Speaker, frankly, I despair. I have lost count of the number of times that I and others across this entire House have come here to press the Minister to put in place a full ban on settlement trade, and the number of times he's prevaricated. I've lost count of the number of times that he's wrung his hands, made statements of concern, expressed worry and condemnation, and yet refused to do what he claims he will do, because he's talked about acting with alacrity. He's talked about using all the leverage we have, and yet he does not. If E1 goes ahead, that is the death knell for the prospect of the Palestinian state that he, all of his benches, and so many of us are so proud of this government for putting in place last year. But it's worth nothing if he doesn't follow up with action and use every lever in this government's power to follow through, to put pressure on the Israeli government and to ensure that the rights of Palestinians are upheld.
The Honourable Lady is right. We've had many exchanges across the dispatch box. I would just gently remind her that over the course of these exchanges, I've recognised the Palestinian state. I have sanctioned Israeli ministers. We have restricted arms sales. We have led statements repeatedly on these issues. I understand that we all are appalled by the violence that continues, but that does not mean we are not taking the action that we can. And no doubt you can set out your own proposals. We have taken repeated actions and will continue to do so.
You and yours, and if you're, the best thing to do is always speak through the chair. That prevents that mistake happening. John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Building on the question of my honourable friend, the member for Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket, what more can we in this House do, and this government do, and other governments around the world do, to make clear to those many Israelis who are appalled by the behaviour of this Israeli government that a two-state solution and a viable Palestinian state is very clearly in their interests, and furthermore that we will do everything in our power to make sure that that state becomes a reality and is safe and secure, just as we want Israel to be safe and secure.
Madam Deputy Speaker, let me beg your forgiveness for forgetting the customs of the House. You would think practice would make perfect. I thank my honourable friend for the question. We need particularly, all of us in election year, to be reminding all of our friends in Israel and all the politicians of the importance of the points that he makes.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. All settlers are criminals because they occupy land that does not belong to them, not just those who are violent. Since the late 90s, successive governments have called the E1 a red line because it would permanently divide the West Bank and destroy the possibility of a Palestinian state. Meanwhile, more than 700,000 settlers now live illegally, over 140 sanctioned settlements and over 100 unsanctioned outposts in the occupied Palestinian territories, and settlements continue to expand, while Palestinians continue to be forcibly displaced. The ICJ has made clear that states must not assist in this unlawful occupation. So is the E1 finally the moment when this government will match its words with action, or will this simply become another so-called red line that Israel crosses without consequence?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've tried to be as explicit as I can be about the potential consequences while abiding to the long-standing position on sanctions.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I will not ask the Minister to comment on future sanctions designations. I understand he can't do that. I want to ask him about something different. I want to ask him about the scope of the multilateral statement. So he will, I'm sure, be very well aware that the statement did not specify just one type of firm, for example, just construction firms. It talks about involvement. So can he confirm that it's the UK government's view that the scope of that statement is, following its wording, not just restricted to construction firms, but that it could cover, for example, firms financing this? Can you just confirm there's no prima facie restriction within that statement?
I thank my honourable friend for the question. The statement was signed by 11 countries. We all have different arrangements and different tools at our disposal. The British government's position is we oppose any involvement of any kind in the E1 settlement. Given the magnitude of the consequences of the E1 settlement, we consider that in a broad way, not a narrow way.
Mike Martin.
Speaker, I think I heard a few moments ago the Minister saying that he hoped that the outcome of the Israeli election would be a policy more amenable to British government policy. So can I just clarify that he, as a Minister of a Crown, is suggesting that the British government would like Netanyahu to lose that election?
It is obviously not appropriate for me to set out who should win an election in a fellow democracy. What I can set out is British government policy and what we would wish to see from Israel. We have been very, very clear over an incredibly long period of time about our views on a two-state solution, about the conduct of the war in Gaza. It is not for us to set out who should win the Israeli election. It is perfectly reasonable for us to set out what we would wish the policy of the Israeli government to be in relation to these questions after October.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I would like to thank my friend, the member for Warwick and Leamington, for securing this question today. I too attended the visit to Israel and Palestine last month, and the scale of the E1 settlement, as has been described, is massive. But just as insidious is the trend that we see, and has been going on for a long time now, of Israeli settlements surrounding Palestinian villages across Palestine and cutting those villages off from vital services like water and other utilities. But also in the ranks of the insidious actions of the Israeli government is the fact that they demand that taxation from Palestine must go through Israel and then be repaid to the Palestinian Authority. That money counts for some 70 to 75% of the Palestinian Authority's revenue. No money has been paid since May 2025, which perhaps explains why they can't do all the things that the opposition would like them to do. Is that an area that we can put some pressure on to ensure that the Palestinian Authority actually has its own revenue, which it's entitled to, in order that it can do its work?
I thank my honourable friend both for the question, and I also know she's been a doughty supporter of some of the Gaza students who were relocated to her constituency. She is right to raise the financial pressure that the Palestinian Authority are under, and indeed the whole of the economy of Palestine, as a result of this dispute about correspondent banking. We've raised this repeatedly and we will continue to do so. The economic viability of Palestine is vital.
Roberts.
The E1 zone expansion is obviously a deliberate attempt to do away with any hope of a two-state solution. Now, the FCDO's unit tracking the Israeli government's breaches of international law was closed earlier this year in April. I'm glad, of course, that his government recognises the state of Palestine and the moves that it has taken so far, but surely the very least his government's watching brief can do is to be willing and able to track atrocities of its own initiative and to come to its own conclusions.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm pleased to confirm to the House the unit wasn't closed, it was moved. The function still remains within the Foreign Office. We still receive assessments. There has been some reorganisation within the department. I was surprised it excited as much interest as it did, but I can confirm the function remains. It was not closed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Advice to UK businesses and complaints to Israeli ministers are not just inadequate, they create ambiguities. They suggest the UK government is prepared to speak but not to act. When Netanyahu previously threatened annexation of parts of the West Bank, we made it clear what the consequences should be. Will the Minister do the same now and say that in the event of any move towards E1, there will be a comprehensive trade and investment ban?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't think I can go further in response to my honourable friend than I have already. We have been clear at the highest possible level in the voice of our Prime Minister the seriousness with which we take this, the breadth of concern that we have and the consequences that are likely to follow. I can't spell out those consequences for reasons I've already alluded to, but I'd reassure him that we treat this with the seriousness it deserves.
Vicky Spade.
Speaker. Yesterday, a group of us met with NGOs and heard about how the settlers are physically surrounding Palestinian homes and schools, with properties built on every side of homes, schools and sports pitches, making it impossible for children to get to and from school. In one case, we were told the only way to reach school was via the back stairs of residential property. Now, all the settlements are illegal. Building E1 is our focus to prevent expansion. So in an election year, the UK has that additional influence on Israelis who also abhor this illegality and violence. So will he consider a full travel ban on all settlers to show there are real consequences for illegal activity?
Yeah.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've spoken myself to schoolgirls impeded in their day-to-day life. We have taken 4 waves of sanctions against settlers, recognising the severity of the situation, and I've been clear that while this situation continues to get worse, we will continue to act.
Warren.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With every expansion of Israel's illegal settlements, with every horrendous act of settler violence, the prospect of a two-state solution recedes. And my constituents in Newcastle Central and West lose faith with the capacity or the will of the rules-based international order to actually deliver some measure of justice for Palestinians. Now, the Minister and I have correspondence on what we could actually do in this country. So will he agree with me that regardless of the technical issues which he has outlined, but as a matter of principle, goods from Israel's illegal settlements should not be traded with the United Kingdom?
Goods produced in illegal settlements should not be traded with the United Kingdom. We distinguish clearly between goods produced in Green Line Israel. I have said repeatedly that no one should benefit from a profit made on land that has been unlawfully procured.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank the Minister very much for his statement, and no one doubts the Minister's commitment to bringing about change. Those of us who have consistently stood up as a firm friend and ally of Israel recognise its absolute right to defend itself and secure its borders. However, as one who represents a deeply rural constituency with a strong tradition of family business and farming, land is not a political commodity, it is a livelihood. In the E1 corridor, any unilateral land grab will disrupt centuries of agricultural practices, cut off traditional grazing routes. When farming infrastructure and small businesses are dismantled or isolated by expansionist local economies collapse, leaving families with no means of self-sufficiency. So will the Minister take time to convey these concerns to our ally and friend and ask for immediate reconsideration of this action?
The Honourable Gentleman asks an important point, and he raises the concern that I know many across this House have raised about the huge disruption to long-standing agricultural practices from the expansion of settlements.
Andy MacDonald.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Government has said that it has advised British businesses against involvement in illegal settlements, and this week warned companies not to bid for these E1 contracts. But given that settlement expansion continues unabated, with properties recently promoted in London, over and above sending in the Advertising Standards Agency, will the Government confirm that it's working with UK regulatory bodies and will ensure existing sanctions, anti-money laundering and proceeds of crime powers to prevent and to punish UK financial and commercial support and involvement for illegal settlements? We have the criminal powers. If he wants to take action, can he explain why they're not being used?
My honourable friend asked me about further use of the Sanctions Money Laundering Act. That's obviously the basis under which all the sanctions under the Foreign Office are done. For the reasons I've set out, I won't say further from the dispatch box about sanctions. We have done 4 waves. We've been clear today, as we were last month. In relation to the expo he refers to, just to clarify for the House, it is legitimate, of course, to sell real estate within Green Line Israel in the UK and to advertise it. It is not legitimate to advertise illegal settlements, and that is why I wrote to the Advertising Standards Agency following that expo.
I'm obliged, Madam Deputy Speaker. Businesses trading with unlawful settlements can be under no illusion that the settlements are unlawful, and that this House, or the majority of it, views them as utterly morally repugnant. And nor can they be under any illusion that the UK government's position is that people should not trade with unlawful settlements. Can I urge the Minister to act swiftly on this, but also to leave no stone unturned to ensure that clever legal arguments around retrospectivity, because any measures will come in after the Minister's clear statement, are closed off. And that, may I urge the Minister, could include primary legislation to ensure that those engaging in this morally repugnant trade are closed off, even if they enter into contracts today and legislation is passed in 2 months' time.
I hesitate, Madam Deputy Speaker, to commit the government to primary legislation. I think the Sanctions and Money Laundering Act has been sufficient for the full wave so far, but I've heard the important points that he's made.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. These settlements are not unhelpful, as the opposition have claimed today. They're illegal. And my constituents and I and myself are horrified by the ongoing settler violence and the expansion of these illegal settlements. So in this context, I welcome the Minister's clear condemnation and further actions committed to today. Can the Minister assure me and my constituents that his department is working with Treasury colleagues to fully map and understand UK finance institutions' exposure to the financing of illegal settlements, their expansion and trade within them? And what's more, when his department and Treasury understand this, are they committed to take action against these institutions?
I thank my honourable friend for his commitment to these issues. I know the people of Uxbridge have raised them with him many times, and he's not failed to reflect those to me. We are taking actions in the way I set out, and I think I answered my honourable friend on the range of concern that we have about the financing of settlements.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I also express my concern about the tone taken by the opposition front bench at the beginning of this UQ. Netanyahu could not have been clearer of his point of view that there should not be a Palestinian state. And the plans for the E1 area near East Jerusalem is just the continued manifestation of this intention in order to entirely destroy the viability of a Palestinian state. Taken together with clear evidence of war crimes, it is obvious to all that this Israeli government is not serious about a sustainable peace for the region. And as members have said numerous times during this UQ as well, I fear that he is pressing ahead with this in order to shore up his support ahead of what are critical elections that could see fresh leadership in Israel that we would all like to see. So can I ask the Minister to tell us a little bit more about what steps he's taking with allies to keep the two-state solution alive, and what sanctions and penalties might be imposed should these settlements proceed?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend about the response to the opposition. We do see this year as particularly critical. One of the things that is particularly critical for us all to do is to engage with the full breadth of Israeli politics and society, to encourage them, alongside our allies, that there is a better way for the State of Israel and indeed for the State of Palestine, and that's going to be a focus up until that election.
Leishman.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, since rightly recognising the state of Israel, since rightly recognising the state of Palestine, I put it to the Minister that actually nothing has changed. The settlement expansions are ongoing, as is the land grabs and ultimately the ethnic cleansing of Palestinian people. The cultural, economic and educational genocide inflicted on Palestinians carries on regardless. Now, for years we have seen what drives Benjamin Netanyahu, what his ultimate goal and ambition is, and that is the eradication of Palestinian people and Palestine. Now, my fear is that diplomacy once again will fail. What will the UK government do to stop that eradication of Palestine and the Palestinian people?
We will do everything we can, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've set out some of the steps taken so far, and I won't hesitate to return to this House as and when is required.
Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I hope I'm not alone in knowing that the vast majority of ordinary Palestinians and Israelis want peace. And as an optimist, I hope they vote for it when they get the chance later this year in both Palestine and in Israel. It's clear that the consensus here is that this expansion would be a bad idea. It would be illegal and also bad for any hope of peace in the future. But what about the existing settlements? How do we consider them? I know the Minister's talked about trade, but what about their actual existence as a barrier to peace? Is the government raising that with Netanyahu's government?
We consider those settlements as illegal, Madam Deputy Speaker, and we are clear with the Israeli government that that is our position.
Joe Morris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I just echo the concerns of many colleagues on all sides of the House on the E1 settlements? Clearly, if they go ahead, they destroy the value of the Palestinian state. That is not a commentary. That is, as has been said, a stated aim. And just building on the comments from my old friend from Oxford East, can I just encourage the Minister to do whatever he can to emphasise to the business community, not just in this country but across the world, that involvement with these settlements is morally bankrupt, that the public itself will not tolerate it, and that we need to do everything we can to stop British businesses being involved with this morally repugnant trade.
I thank my honourable friend for the question. That was one of the reasons we set out even clearer business guidance, both to our own businesses, and I'm sure many others will have taken notice as well.
Final question, Warren Davis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Minister's strong condemnation of the annexation of land in Gaza and the West Bank. But what reassurance can the Minister give members of this House that no military components, not just bombs and bullets, that we have sold to Israel have been used in this further illegal settlement expansion?
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's important to say at the moment the E1 is going through a tendering process. There are not yet spades in the ground. That is what we must seek to avert. That is going to be a focus of our diplomacy, as it has been since the most recent announcements by Prime Minister Netanyahu in, I think, September 2025 of his intention to go ahead. We have, as many members have said over the course of this afternoon, a window before October, and we intend to use it.
That is the end of the Israel E1 zone expansion urgent question. If the front benches wish to shuffle over. Colleagues are ready. We move on to the statement on reforming flood Minister Emma Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the opportunity to update the House on the reforms Flood Re are announcing today with support of this government. These changes will ensure that Flood Re remains fair, sustainable and focused on those who need it the most, while supporting a transition to a more resilient insurance market by 2039. Flood risk unites members across this House. We all recognise the devastating impact flooding has on people and communities and the importance of having access to affordable insurance. That is why this government has put a record amount of investment into flood protections and simplified the funding rules. This year alone, we unlocked £1.4 billion to enhance flood resilience across England, funding more than 600 projects and better protecting more than 70,000 properties from the devastating impacts of flooding. But despite this record investment, flooding is an ever-increasing risk. Flood Re was established to manage a transition to prices that better reflect underlying flood risk and promote affordability and availability of insurance. And since its launch, Flood Re has been a big success and is a strong example of government and industry working together to address systemic risk, a partnership that started to be strengthened under a Labour government after the 2007 floods. Now, Flood Re works by receiving a subsidy paid for by households that buy insurance. That money is then used to purchase insurance, so households who wouldn't be able to get insurance in an open market have affordable premiums. But the context in which it operates has changed. Rising claims, higher reinsurance costs and more properties being identified at risk are placing increased pressure on the scheme. We now have a perverse system where money collected from all insurance customers, from all parts of the country, from all income brackets, is flowing to the richest households in the country. That is not fair and it needs to change. In the last 3 of the 4 years, Flood Re has spent more repairing homes in the most expensive council tax bands of G and H, which make up less than 4% of homes in UK homes, than it has spent in repairing homes in bands A and B, which make up around 45% of homes. And an example shows why change is necessary. In 2025, a property near a river was flooded, resulting in a claim cost to Flood Re of over £3 million. The property had very limited flood resilience measures in place, and the claim covered extensive restoration costs, including a quad garage, an indoor swimming pool, a jacuzzi and gym, a music room and den, a machinery storage unit, an outdoor AstroTurf paddle court, and a 5-a-side football pitch. It is of course right that all properties are insured, but without reform to Flood Re, we will continue to have a system where the average and low-income households are subsidising flood insurance for the richest households in the country. That is why reforming Flood Re is needed, not to set a new policy direction, but to restore it to its original purpose. And that's what we're doing. So first, Flood Re will work with insurers to reform its premium model so support is better targeted. Flood Re will aim to make premiums as fair as possible across different council tax bands, regions and areas. Second, Flood Re will introduce a cap on the claims insurers can pass to Flood Re, limiting payouts to an agreed level, with insurance companies, of course, covering the remainder. And that will be worked out with Flood Re and insurers. And third, I have spoken to people who have lost everything through flooding and been unable to afford contents insurance. So I am delighted that Flood Re is more than halving the premiums it charges insurers for contents-only insurance for the 45% of homes in council tax bands A and B to £25 a year from April 2027. This government is restoring fairness. We are making insurance affordable and we are helping with the cost of living pressure. And finally, Flood Re will improve efficiency, make a better use of its resources, reduce reliance on costly reinsurance while maintaining financial resilience. But to protect all homes from ongoing flood risk, we need more than just flood insurance and large flood defences. We need individual homes to become more flood resilient. That is why Flood Re will also work with insurers and lenders to introduce flood performance certificates, helping households better understand their flood risk and ensuring that if they take actions to make their homes more resilient, it is reflected in the cost of their premiums. And this builds on the work of the recommendations in the Flood Ready report. Flood Re will also strengthen incentives for Build Back Better, a UK home insurance sector initiative which, instead of simply restoring a home to the condition exactly as it was before, allows an additional £10,000 as part of the insurance claim to improve the flood resilience of the home. These reforms will be implemented from 2028, with the reduction in contents premium for bands A and B taking effect from April 27. And Flood Re will keep the scheme's eligibility criteria under review, including how it applies to leaseholders. So under this government, more homes are better protected from flooding than they were when we came into government. Our country will become more resilient to flooding as homes are incentivised to take action with flood performance certificates, and the 45% of people living in average and low-income households will now be able to afford to protect their homes from the devastation of flooding. This is the difference a Labour government makes, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Sir Ashley Fox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for advance sight of her statement. I'd also like to thank her for the recent conversations we've had about flooding in Somerset. Flooding is a huge challenge for areas around the country. 6.3 million properties in England are currently located in areas at risk of flooding, including many in my own constituency. When floods occur, the Environment Agency, local volunteer groups and farmers work to help people quickly, often in difficult circumstances. I was humbled and deeply proud to see the way the community pulled together in affected areas in flooding earlier this year, particularly in Moorland and Fordgate. So the Minister knows how seriously I take flooding and is engaged with me following my requests for stronger national support, clearer local responsibilities, more dredging and improving pumping capacity. The last Conservative government took real action to prevent flooding and protect homes and businesses. That ensured that over 600,000 properties were better protected from flooding and coastal erosion, and between 2015 and 2024, over 900,000 acres of farmland were protected. In 2020, the last government announced a doubling of capital funding into flood defences in England to £5.6 billion from 2021 to 27. Flood Ray was set up under the former Conservative government and remains an important scheme to promote the availability and affordability of flood insurance for eligible homes. Flood Ray's recent accounts report contains serious warnings for ministers. Flood Ray is clear that the external environment has changed materially, with higher climate-driven loss volatility, tighter global reinsurance capacity, and greater pressure on affordability. It says the scheme is now retaining higher levels of risk and facing increased liability exposure. And at the same time, Flood Ray warns that the scheme is under structural pressure. Its board has said that improved flood mapping has led to more properties being classified as high risk, including a growing number of higher value homes, and that without change, the scheme risks are being asked to carry unsustainable levels of exposure and cost. So please will the Minister explain what steps she is taking so that Flood Re's growing pressures don't result in additional costs for households through higher insurance bills? Will ministers bring forward a credible long-term flood resilience plan? Will she say whether the government has plans to include businesses in Flood Ray? What assessment has the department made of the impact of these changes on households who are asset-rich but income-poor, including pensioners living in higher-band homes in flood-risk areas? Now, in her statement, the Minister said Flood Ray will reform its premium model across council tax bands and regions. So will she publish the modelling behind those changes, including regional impacts, so households can see what this means for them? Flood performance certificates may help households understand risk, but will she confirm who will pay for them? Will they be mandatory? And will they affect mortgage availability? Flood Ray has done valuable work, but households continue to need affordable insurance. They also need a government that is serious about flood prevention, resilient homes, and long-term protection for communities. On this side of the House, we will always work with the government to ensure that every person living in a property vulnerable to flooding gets the support they need.
I thank the honourable gentleman, and I recognise his commitment to flood protection, and reference he made to the meeting that we had where we discussed the £50 million that we're putting into Somerset because of the very particular landscape and challenges that Somerset had. And he's right to highlight the accounts that Flood Re have produced, and quite rightly, without reform and without change, we would be in a poor situation. Now, Flood Re has been an amazing success, but to continue for the next 10 years, it needs to have change. And that's why those changes I mentioned, where we're looking at targeting for those who need it the most by looking at introducing that cap, making it cheaper, contents cover for lower council tax bands, but also the work on the premium model. One of the other changes, which is probably not as eye-catching, but it's allowing access to some of its trapped capital to make reinsurance costs cheaper. All of these reforms that Flood Re are introducing are there to ensure that it's sustainable and it keeps going. And in terms of continuing our support for flood protection, he'll know that we've put the most money any government has ever put into flood protection, so £10.5 billion committed for the next 10 years. There are no current plans to include businesses because, as I say, it works on levying every insurance company. So if you were to look at including businesses, you would be levying every business in the country to pay for it. And in terms of how we can look at those people in those top council tax bands, that's why we're looking at the flood performance certificate. So if they can take action to improve the resilience of their home, it's reflected in their premiums. We're doing some pilots, and I'm been pushing insurance companies and others to get these pilots out the door as quickly as possible. But we're also looking not just at the top council tax bands, but also people in social housing as well, to see how flood performance certificates could could work. And then in terms of flood re and sort of when are these changes going to take place, contents insurance changes take place from 27, but in terms of putting the cap, it's from 2028. So up until that period, flood re is going to be doing extensive engagement with insurers and with other people to make sure that they're setting the affordable limit. But this is all about ensuring that flood re is
Ladies and gentlemen, may I please introduce your host for this afternoon, Ms. Carrie Crowley.
Good afternoon, everybody. Fáilte Rove Illigan Shaw. The opening ceremony is about to begin, but I would like to invite the speaking party to take their seats, please. Tá an ahasarm fáilte chuir roimh Illig anseo go Castlán Bhlockley. I am delighted to welcome all of you to Dublin Castle today to mark the beginning of Ireland's presidency of the Council of the European Union. It is a very special day for all of us. I am joined on stage by the Dublin Youth Choir and the Defence Forces Band are beside us, all ready to play. And I invite all of you, if possible, to be upstanding because we are going to raise some flags. Thank you.
May the Bratica! Mel Irid! Mel the Bratica! Contosig! Gamar! Marshall! Bratica! Radag! Five! Stand! Mel Bratica! A mark! A pine! Mel Bratica! Cortège!
Guramagi, Dublin Youth Choir and the Army Band playing Our on the Vein, our national anthem. I would ask that you now stay standing, please, because we are going to raise the European flags, the flag of the EU, and play the anthem of the European Union.
Miller Brattigan! Cheers! Miller Brattigan! It's Jack and Pete! Miller Brattigan! Fantastic! Come on, for sure!
Thank you so much to Dublin Youth Choir and the Defence Forces Band for a rousing rendition of Ode to Joy. The good news is you can now be seated. Sigi Leverdal. And Ta'ana has our Minish Foite a Churriv Ordishach, Micheál Martin, by Shalart Livigan Nomates. I'm now delighted to welcome the Taoiseach Micheál Martin to the stage.
Cuinúsle a galéir tá fáiltear mhór roimh go caisleán bhalla á clia inmh, agus muid ag comóra hús uachtaránach na hÉirden chuaile an Aontais Eorpaig. Cé go bhfuil éire site imil an Atlantic, ba hir an Eorpach I gcónaí. Is í ar maulríocht san Aontas Eorpach, an léirú is fearr atá aghaing ar bhéanúlacht Eorpach le breis agus chuige bliain anuas. In éanacht lenar go fartathe, thugar mar áid a bhfuil míad brodúil a rá, gur bí or náid féin í. It is my privilege as Taoiseach to welcome you all to Dublin Castle this afternoon to mark this important moment. A very special welcome, or Céad Míle Fáilte, to the President of the European Council, Antonia Costa, and the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Today, Ireland assumes the responsibilities of the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union for the 8th time. Just over half a century ago, in January 1972, the then Taoiseach Jack Lynch and Minister for Foreign Affairs Dr Patrick Hillery signed the accession treaty on behalf of Ireland to join the European communities. Few events in Ireland's history had been so transformative. At that time, average Irish incomes were roughly 2/3 of the European average. The so-called marriage bar, requiring women to give up their employment, had not yet been abolished. And we faced the worst year of violence during the Troubles, which saw nearly 500 men, women and children killed. Ireland's emergence as a modern, open economy and society is deeply intertwined with our membership of the European Union. It helped us grow our economy, invest in our communities and supported social changes. Our European partners made a unique contribution to peace and reconciliation on this island, for which we will always be grateful. But European Union membership is not a one-way street. Previous Irish presidencies have helped realise significant milestones in our shared European history. We remember in particular the historic Day of Welcomes in May 2004, when the European Union gained 10 new member states in its biggest ever enlargement. Despite its location on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean, Ireland has always been a deeply European country. From the monks who travelled Europe, keeping the light of learning alive through the dark ages, to the young Erasmus students of today, we've always been proud Europeans. Together with our European partners, we have built a union that we are honoured to call home. We have weathered storms and crises together, and we have celebrated in joy together, knowing that we are always stronger together. Ní nacht go cur le chéile. We are proud to be part of a European Union in which pluralism, non-discrimination, tolerance, justice, solidarity and equality are valued, nurtured and never taken for granted. We are proud that Ireland has become a beacon of hope to others for the transformative potential of the European ideal. We say to countries on their journey towards EU membership, we are determined to take you as far down that path as we can. As we take on the presidency role, we commit to making every effort to make our economy stronger, protect our shared values and keep our people secure. We will stand unswervingly by the people of Ukraine, inspired by their courage and determined to ensure that they get the peace and justice they deserve. Holding the presidency is an honour and a responsibility, and we are ready to give it our all. We pay warm tribute to Cyprus, our predecessor in office, for the great work that you have done, and we look forward to handing the torch forward to our Lithuanian friends at the start of 2027. Vive l'Europe, an Europe abu. Gormila Mahagwiv Galer.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. As you mentioned in your remarks, this will be Ireland's 8th EU presidency, and it's notable that during our very first presidency, back in 1975, we hosted the very first meeting of the European Council right here at Dublin Castle, St Oit Canan Cana, in the very same place. It is therefore fitting that the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, is here with us today, and I would like to welcome him to the stage now.
Dear Taoiseach, dear Michal, Mr. President, dear Volodymyr, Member of the Government, Excellencies, it's a pleasure to join you here in Dublin to mark the beginning of the island's presidency of the Council. Over the next 6 months, Ireland will be the steward of the Council agenda, working on behalf of 450 million of European citizens. Your presidency motto is crystal clear: strength with unity. Now, it is time to bring the wisdom and positive gained through Ireland's journey in the European Union to help guide Europe through this challenging global geopolitical juncture. Values, competitiveness and security are the 3 pillars of your presidency agenda. They are also key priorities for our Union. First, values. Our Union is a union of values. Peace, democracy, solidarity and security are in our DNA. Now more than ever, the European Union needs to defend those values within Europe and globally. I applaud your commitment to strengthening the European Union's role as a principal global actor and your firm support for the United Nations, multilateralism and respect of international law. These are principles at the core of international rules-based order, and Ireland has consistently been at the forefront of that effort. They must guide our work for peace and security in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, in the Strait of Hormuz, and across the wider Middle East. And of course, they must also remain at the heart of efforts to achieve a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. President Zelensky's presence here today is a powerful reminder that our commitment remains unbreakable. But our vision goes beyond the war, because Ukraine's future is in the European Union. The recent formal opening of accession negotiations with Ukraine and also with Moldova shows our commitment to enlargement is our best investment in peace, security, stability and prosperity in Europe. We open the negotiation of the first cluster, and we will wish to open all the other clusters as soon as possible. We must build on this renewed momentum in the accession process and work together to achieve substantial progress in negotiations with all candidate countries during the Irish presidency. Second, competitiveness. In response to the growing external pressures on our competitiveness and prosperity, European Union leaders designed 2026 as the year of competitiveness. The One Europe, One Market agenda and the roadmap agreed by the Council with the European Parliament and the European Commission set out an ambitious timeline to achieve decisive progress in 2026 and 2027. An agenda which involves completing the single market, pursuing the strategy of simplification, ensuring affordable energy, supporting innovation and reducing strategic dependencies. And above all, completing what has been in the pipeline since 1992, a capital markets union, a unified energy market and a unified telecommunications market that will boost Europe's economic growth, secure our digital transformation and strengthen our economic and industrial resilience. Third, security. Security as a defence dimension, and strengthening Europe's security and defence remains high on the agenda as we work to implement the Defence Readiness Roadmap 2030. This is crucial for the European Union's credibility, influence and power in a volatile, complex world. But our security also has an economic dimension. That is why we are strengthening our economy while protecting our European social model. A social model built on inclusion, human dignity and solidarity to address one of our citizens' greatest concerns, access to affordable housing. That is why I placed the housing crisis on the agenda of the European Council last October. That's why the Commission presented a strategy for affordable housing, and that's why housing will be a key focus of the Irish presidency. Thank you, Micheál. We must tackle this multi-layered crisis together, and your leadership will be crucial to making progress. Last but not least, all our ambitions must be supported by appropriate financial foundations. So, the multi-annual financial framework will be a key priority and deliverable of the Irish presidency. We have a shared responsibility to have our next long-term budget up and running at the beginning of 2028. To make that possible, we need an overall agreement by the end of this year. That is the only way for funds to continue flowing uninterrupted to our citizens, to our companies, to our farmers. We need to ensure that the European Union has the resources it needs to deliver on what our citizens expect from us: a more competitive, more innovative, more cohesive, and more autonomous, safer and more secure Europe. And Ireland has a decisive role to play. Ireland's European experience puts you in the right position to be an honest broker in these negotiations. It will be challenging, but I'm confident we will reach a deal until the end of this year, and we will be counting on the Irish humour and charm to see us through. I would like to conclude with the words of your Taoiseach, Jack Lynch, in 1972, during the referendum on Ireland joining the European Union, and his hopes that it would lead to a better Ireland in the better Europe. And I quote, "The road we take will determine not only the future of our country for generations to come, but also the contribution we make to the creation of a Europe that will measure up to the light ideals of the founders of the European project." Ireland's European journey is a success story. I'm convinced that your presidency will not just show that Ireland is at the heart of Europe, it will demonstrate that Ireland is a decisive actor in building a better and stronger Europe. I'm looking forward to working closely with you, dear Michal, with your government, to deliver on an ambitious shared agenda. Thank you, and my best wishes to all of you for a successful Irish presidency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Costa, for your kind remarks and for being with us today. Our next speaker is the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, a leader whose bravery and determination have inspired people all across Europe. Before I welcome him to the stage, can all guests please stand for the raising of the Ukrainian flag and the Ukrainian national anthem.